I finished college. I went to Ole Miss,
Mhm.
studied business, and then I, me and some friends paddled the whole Mississippi River. It was a fundraiser. It was for fun. 2 months. It was a pretty epic adventure before, the real world. Well, that trip really opened my eyes up to things. And before that trip, I kind of wanted to be in real estate, finance. Came back from that trip thinking, I think I'd rather be independent. I think I was going to kind of follow my father's footsteps in real estate. And I decided really rather do something on my own. And so anyway, when I got back, my dad handed me the keys to a small family business that was a tree farm. And I was like, while I'm figuring things out, I'll run the tree farm.
Mhm.
And so, but that quickly turned into opportunities for landscape. And people said, hey, can you plant this? Can you do this? And all we grew was large, mature live oaks.
Mhm.
And a lot of demand was for other things. Hey, do you do cypress trees? Do you do this? You do that? Can you plant bushes? And I was like, well, hell, I'll get on YouTube and figure that out. I mean, I got to make a living here.
Yeah.
And so I just learned literally on YouTube. I worked for some friends for free and just started a business. I pretty quickly shut the tree farm down because it was just clearly not where the demand was, but the
Mhm.
demand was for residential landscape. And so I just went after it. I was 24 when I started the business. I made this kind of deal with myself that Rob, work hard for 5 years, put the money back in the business as much as possible, and then hopefully after 5 years or so, you'll have a profitable business and maybe you will have met your wife, started a family. But right now, time to grind.
Mhm.
And that was the deal I made for myself. So, I mean, I'm living on beans and rice. Staying at a friend's house, cheap rent. Life is inexpensive, and I'm working 90 hours a week, and I'm
Mhm.
just grinding and learning everything the hard way, and just grinding it. But I'm building it. I think year one we did about just under 100,000. Started in May, so in about 6 months. Year two we jumped to about 400,000 in
Mhm.
revenue, and I'm just hiring people off the street,
Yeah.
right? I mean, convicts. I mean, the stories I could tell you. We can go down the rabbit trails if you want. But, year three, we did about 600,000 and I'm just bootstrapping, right? I
Mhm.
don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to run a business or landscape, but I'm like, I can figure this out. I'm going down people who I
Mhm.
used to go to church with and people who went to the school that I went to. I'm calling I'm marketing myself however I can, playing around with Google. And so things are growing and I'm having fun. Um, Year four is when things took a big turn positive. So I got a big commercial job. It was a
Mhm.
$300,000 hospital job. It was like fixing a hospital's landscape, not a new install. It was 17,000 plants and 600 tons of rock. And I was like, I've made it, right? I'm like 26, 27 years old. I was engaged to be married. They gave me this huge down payment. They said, how do you want to be paid? I said, I want 30% before I start, 30% after 30 days, 30% after 60, and 10% retainage. And they were like, okay. So, I mean, get this big check, pull a bunch of money out of the business to put a down payment on a house. I'm on top of the world. Business goes from 600,000 to 1.5 million. I'm like, I am the king. I
Mhm.
have figured it out. Well, didn't manage my cash flow, right? So really challenging year for me where I thought to myself, man, if I could just get to a million. Well, we hit a million in like July, you
Mhm.
know, but I'm overpaying my guys. I'm not managing my numbers. I'm not looking at things very closely. Come to the end of the year, we lost money. And I'm like, but I was on my high horse. And so I didn't see that coming. And there's no money in the bank. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. And so, and I don't know how to manage people very well. It's just saying yes to all these different types of jobs. 2016 comes, I'm like, we're going to figure it out. We're going to bid a bunch of big commercial jobs and just keep dominating that field. Well, I kept winning these jobs, but they weren't like Women's Hospital.
Mhm.
I was working through general contractors, getting slow paid. I mean, it was very painful and the debt starts piling up, right? So
Yep.
come mid 2016, I've got almost $500,000 in debt and it's ballooning
Mhm.
and I am in a pile of shame. My wife doesn't even know about the debt. My friends don't know that the business is not only losing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, but also I'm piling up this massive debt load. And I'm still working a ton.
Mhm.
Life is not going how I thought it would go. Meanwhile, we're hoping we can get pregnant with our first kid, but the business is sucking money out of my wife's social work salary.
Mhm.
And I'm trapped. It's a very uncomfortable situation. And probably some people listening can relate to this scenario. So I'll tell you, I'm driving. It's June. 2016. My wife and I are going on a beach trip with some friends, and which we probably couldn't have afforded, but we did went anyway. And she looks at me, she says, "Honey, how much longer are we going to do this?" And I was like, "Give me a year. Give me 1 year to turn this thing around, or else I'll sell it for whatever it's worth, or figure out how to pay the dets, and
Hmm.
I'll go in the towel and I'll go work for the man." She says, "Okay, let's do it. 1 year." And so the clock started ticking, and I knew that working harder wasn't the way to do it. I had to
Hmm.
change what I was doing, but I didn't know what to do. So fast forward to October. One of my suppliers, Ewing, flies my wife and I out to Talladega to a NASCAR race of all places.
Hmm.
There at NASCAR, I meet another landscape contractor, and he became my guardian. He became my savior angel. I call him my
Hmm.
redneck angel. He opened up to me about his business and about his past and about things he'd overcome. And he says, "Dude, Rob, I've been where you are, and this is how I got out of it. And I'd love to come along this journey with you." And he didn't say it like that. It's not really his way he would talk, but he said, "Look, come join this little group of guys that I'm in, and we've all built some pretty incredible businesses. I'd love to help you." I was like, "Why do you want to help me?" He says, "People help me out, so I want to help you." I said, "Okay." And my wife's like, "Do it. Do everything he says."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Okay." So I began to let him mentor me. And I drove up to his office a few hours north of me a few months later and showed him all the books, and he was like, "Rob, it's way worse than I thought."
Hmm.
He's like, "We can do this," and he said, "Chess, not checkers. We're playing the long game." And so I started making a lot of hard phone calls. I started calling all those big commercial jobs and saying, we're not going to be able to do this project. I know we won the bid and the project starts in 6 months, but like, you know, my mentor helped me to focus on margins
Hmm.
and on knowing my numbers and those kinds of things. So I began to transition out of the big commercial project into recurring residential revenue. Um, Mowing, which I hadn't done before, not for residential, fertilization weed control, things like that, and starting that switch, which is a big pendulum switch from like big, sexy commercial jobs to move over to like 50, 60, $70 transactions. I'm like, "Is that really the ticket?" He goes, "That's the ticket.
Hmm.
That's where the margins are. That's where you don't have to wait on money. You get a credit card on file." And I'm like, "Okay." So long story short, 2016 we lost I think 130,000 dollars on a P&L. 2017 we're in the black, and I'm like, "Hallelujah." My wife and I feel comfortable enough to have a baby. She's
Yep.
able to stay home. We're like, the business is just breaking even. You know what I mean? But it's enough to kind of support our lifestyle, which is pretty minimal. And it's this huge sense of relief of like, we can do this. Like
Mm.
there was this progress of like, we can do this, we can do that. And it was hard, right? That first year was a lot of hard phone calls. I'm calling people that owe money and saying, "Listen, I promise I'm good for it, but I can't pay you for 3 months. I got to keep my
Hmm.
cash in the business or I'm going to go under." And they said, everybody was so graceful. They understood. They said, "Look, I get it. Thanks for being honest." And so I stayed the course. 2017, that's when I started Facebook marketing, which was a real game changer for my business. Um, and then 2018, 2019, and I just kind of stayed that same course, residential, recurring business, focusing on my margins, finding a really good leadership team,
Hmm.
using EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System, that book Traction.
Yep.
I think I've read it now 6 times. I implemented that pretty early, and then a system called Profit First, kind of a way of accounting.
Yep.
And then I just stayed the course, man. And so 2016, I'm working 90 hours a week. I'm bleeding cash. My life sucks.
Hmm.
And then fast forward to 2020. In 2023, last year, my wife and I and three young kids moved 700 miles away to South Carolina. Now
Yeah.
there's a lot that happened in that 6 years, and we can talk about that as much as you want. But essentially, I just stayed the course. I found great people. I
Hmm.
delegated everything that I could do well, or you know anybody who could do something 80% as well as me, I handed it off to somebody else,
Yep.
or sometimes even 70%. And I went through some people, but I built a great leadership team. I
Hmm.
followed a good model. I marketed the hell out of myself. Spent a lot of money on marketing, and but dialed it in. And it's been this incredible transformation. My wife and I, we took the kids. We did 2 1-month long trips, one in 21 and one in 22, to test the concept of,
Hmm.
can we really do this? And right around the time, by the way, when I met my mentor in Talladega is when I read the book 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. So when I
Hmm.
read that book, I was in the pit and I was like, "Oh wow, I want to build a business that is, I get my life back, but this is the real goal." And it seemed like such a crazy idea. But I'd say about a year and a half ago, I hit that 4 Hour Work Week, quite literally. And it was like, "Oh my gosh, we did it." And so it's pretty exciting. And when you are able to take a business to that from that transformation, then it's like you have so many options open to yourself. You can
Hmm.
start other businesses, you can have more time with your kids, more hobbies, you can move. So we said, hell, let's move. Where do you want to move? Somewhere that's nice, not for work, not for family, for fun. Somewhere that's beautiful, that's got a lot to do, that's got a good trout fishing. And so, heck, we picked Greenville. We
Yep.
visited and bought a house 3 weeks later. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I've been doing with my business for the past, 10 or 12 years.
That's awesome, man. It's cool to see just how the trajectory went. And I feel like your trajectory is something that a lot of business owners probably also need to do because they're still stuck in that first like 6 7 years of your business. But what I want to ask is, I know a big thing for a lot of people when they want to make the change is not just obviously making those hard phone calls you made, but then I'm sure you built a culture at your company all
Oh,
the
sure.
years before that, and you had built this team around the culture that was currently there in the company. What was the effect on the team and the culture when you made that, when you went from that year where you were like a couple hundred grand in the red to being back profit? What happened with the team and the culture that year?
Mm, that's a great question. So I can definitely guarantee that there's nobody who was with me then who's with me now. I had to kind of clean house. Um, Part of it was I had a really negative culture when I was doing that, right? So not only was the business losing money, but I kind of felt there was kind of a mutiny going on, right? So with my team, with the managers that I'd hired, I overpaid them. I gave them too much power. I also put myself in a position where I was very young and inexperienced, and I hired guys who were a lot more experienced than me, thinking they could help me to win these big jobs and execute them, which is true. But they also just saw me as like the the young guy with connections, not as like the leader of the pack.
Hmm.
And so they began to turn the team against me, and it was them versus me. So the culture was very toxic. I hated waking up and going to work in the morning because I knew it wasn't really my business. Even though they worked for me, they had me over a barrel because the expertise that they had, or the expertise that I thought that they had that I didn't have. And so I gave them a lot of leverage, and the culture was very, very toxic.
Hmm.
Um, and it was painful, and I hated going to work. So the culture switch, when I began to, start taking control of the business and started having a lot more clients that were, paying recurring revenue, also gave me power over my clients, right? If I had a difficult client, I just say, Miss Jones, we're not a good, vendor for you. You should call somebody else. And when I began to make a little bit of money is when I realized I have options. I can hire different people. I'm not beheld to these guys over here. And they were forced out or they left on their own volition. And I began to see the kind of people that I wanted in my organization. And I put my core values down,
Hmm.
which are disciplined, ownership, and teachable. And I remember, and a lot of people come up with those or core values or whatever, and they put them on the wall and they say, "Oh, look at me, I got core values." But I lived and died by them. I was like, these are the qualities of the people that I'm looking for. These are things that I really value, qualities that I hope that I have and will continue to grow in. And these are things that I want my company to look like. And I look for people who had those things
Hmm.
and found them. My first key hire, um, she's now my director, managing director. She's basically a CEO. That was 4.5 years ago. And that was really the beginning of a major cultural switch. I had a really nice lady running the office, but as the business adapted and grew and shifted and became more technologically advanced and we had a lot more volume. She couldn't hang. Wonderful
Hmm.
person. One of the most painful conversations I've ever had, but she couldn't hang. And so I remember I had to get rid of her. I gave her a really nice severance and I brought in this other gal and she stepped in and she owned it. And I was like, oh, we got something going on here. And I knew within 5 minutes of the interview, I knew she was going to be a rock star and she knew that it was going to be a good fit for her. And her name's Callie. She's fantastic. And so she came 4.5 years ago. That was really the beginning of a new culture. It was like, okay, I've got something I can build off of here. I have a model, and now I have a great person who can help to implement things because I'm the visionary. She is the implementer,
Hmm.
the integrator, as you would actually call it in EOS. Um, And so we began to build from there. And I was free to grow the business and to work on the business instead of in it because I started building a great team. And since then, our culture's fantastic now. I mean, we have crawfish boils all the time. We have company retreats. We have a lot of fun. We don't take ourselves that seriously, but we take our work seriously. A
Mhm.
ton of fun. And it's just a really enjoyable. I mean, I'm pretty good friends with all my people now, especially my leadership team. And we have a lot of fun together, share the profits. It's an open book company.
Mhm.
Um, and it's a really fun journey. And now everybody really loves coming to work. And so I've got people on my leadership team who've been with me for 6 years now,
Yep.
so it's pretty awesome to watch everybody's personal transformation along with our company transformation.
Mhm.
And it's really fun to be a part of that.
I'm glad you brought up key hires and especially the office. So, obviously, when you're running a landscaping business, you get a lot of reps in when it comes to hiring and managing
Oh my gosh.
landscapers.
Yes,
Can you still hear me?
I can. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to turn my sound so that my output is going to go to my microphone. Okay. All right, keep going. You're good.
Hmm. So, we obviously have a lot of experience hiring and managing landscapers, but something that can be really tough and something even I struggled with was when you're making the first office hires, you've never done it and you're looking for not some of the values may be a little different, but it's definitely a different kind of job. So, what would you recommend? What are your tips for making good key hires in the office when you're just starting out?
That's a good question. So, and this is kind of obvious for office hires, but definitely industry experience is completely irrelevant,
Hmm.
right? So I think that's true in the office and the field. For most positions, experience I find is actually often a negative thing. People take their experience and they think they're an expert and then they're not teachable. So hiring somebody in the office who fits your core values, which can be hard to determine sometimes, but first you have to know what kind of company you want to build. Then you have to know the qualities of the kind of people who are going to fit that culture. And then you have to be able to, in a 30-minute interview, try to figure out, does this person have those qualities, which is tough. Got to ask good questions. Um, but I'll say this, the interview I find to be far less important than the references. So like I've made a mistake before, actually in the past year, where I hired somebody who was kind of a half office, half field employee
Hmm.
and somebody I'd known for a long time, about 10 years, in kind of a casual setting. And they were in the industry, a lot of industry expertise, and we had a good rapport. And I hired this person based on like our relationship and our friendship. Didn't check references, didn't find out why he was let go of a at a $10 million landscape company down the road.
Hmm.
I trusted what he said about why he was let go and this and that. Didn't call them. And even if somebody tells you not to call their employee, you can call them, right? You can do that, and you should do that.
That's when you definitely should call them
That's
if
when
they
you
say
definitely.
don't.
And I made a mistake, and I didn't check references, and
Yeah.
one of the worst hires I've ever made.
Hmm.
And he was a friend, an acquaintance. I wouldn't say friend,
Hmm.
but so references are so key, because people can ace an interview and put on their best face, but you know, references are really important. And then another thing that, because it's hard to tell those core values, but you can often pick them up in the references. You can hear those conversations and hear what they say, what they don't say. Those are important. Another thing is having a pretty specific job description and then having KPIs that you're monitoring, right? Those key performance indicators, so that early on, when someone comes on board, they know exactly what's expected of them. Hey, these are your key responsibilities. These are the numbers that tell me and tell you if you're winning or not.
Hmm.
You know, a lot of quantitative data and metrics to hold them to. And people think, oh, can this admin job be, are there numbers? Absolutely. There can be, how many emails are not responded to, or there could be a timeline for all sorts of different things. There are
Hmm.
plenty of quantitative metrics that you can use, and maybe just use a few. You don't need to have 100 different data points, but having a few can be really helpful. And you want people to know if they're winning.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of bouncing around a lot of things, but I would say the most important thing is having a really good reference checking system, right?
Yeah.
Get at least two, check in with former employers, not friends, not family, not their Uncle Harry. No, people that they've worked for. In my opinion, the best hires are ones who just moved to town, right? And they're new in town and they moved there for whatever reason. Maybe their spouse moved to town and so they probably left their other job on good terms. And here they are new in town looking for a new opportunity.
Mhm.
That to me is usually the best gold.
Yep. Have you read Who by Jeff Smart?
No.
Um, I would, just because you mention it, so our hiring process, all we care about is references now. We've gotten rid of a ton of stuff, and it's basically like just we're gonna get your references. So don't lie to us. And that's what he said is really the whole interview. Yes, you're trying to figure out their capabilities, but a big part is just what do the references say.
Hmm.
And it's a really cool process. I'd recommend it.
I'll check it out.
Um, so I want to ask you then, you mentioned you're a visionary.
Hmm.
Now, a lot of company owners are visionaries and not integrators, at least from what I've seen through the
Sure.
EOS model. One, what do you think is the best way for a visionary to find their integrator? Because I know it can be tough. And then two, once they find them, what is the best way for them to not butt heads all the time? Because they think very differently, but they want the same goal. So what's your
Mhm.
advice on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Okay, for finding, I'd say if you're a true visionary, look for someone who's basically the opposite of you. Right? So my integrator is extremely organized,
Mhm.
very anal about a lot of things. Nothing slips through the cracks. I
Yep.
mean, just like very, she's by the book.
Mhm.
Look for an oldest child. Birth order matters. I don't think you're going to find nearly as good of an integrator with a youngest child as an oldest child. Seriously, find somebody who's got several siblings underneath them. Um, and in my opinion, females are often better at details than males. So I mean, that's true in my company. The ones who are really good at the details, and those numbers that really matter tend to be female, at least in my personal experience. So I think females can make a really good integrator. And another thing, by all means, have them take some personality tests. So I'm a big fan of two things: DISC
Mhm.
and Enneagram. So I don't know if everybody listening is familiar with those two. There's a DISC short assessment that's like a one pager that you can take in like 5 minutes that
Mhm.
I have every single employee or applicant fill out. And that just shows you it's not like the long deal. It's literally one pager and it tells you how high you are in dominant,
Mhm.
intuitive, I forget what that one is, and conscientiousness. But the Enneagram is really important.
Mhm.
Visionary, I mean, visionary, I don't know the numbers really that matter that much, which are often talking to business owners here and talking about yourself, but a good integrator is going to be a one, right? Ones on the Enneagram are very detail oriented, very by the book, rule followers. You're
Mhm.
looking for rule followers. You're also looking for somebody who's going to stand up to you, right? So if you're building a business that you want to run without you being around, you need to have someone who has enough gumption to look you in the eye and say, I think that's a bad idea,
Mhm.
right? So this gets into working with them, right? So a lot of business owners can't handle that because they want to be the boss. They want to call the shots. They want to run things like a dictator
Mhm.
because that's easier to do because it's a very binary way of running things. I'm the boss. I'm right. You're wrong. Do what I say. That's how you build a shit culture,
Yep.
right? So if you want to have a good relationship with your integrator, you have to trust them and give them the freedom to make mistakes and to challenge you on things. So my integrator and we certainly do have disagreements. We have some throwdowns sometimes. What we try to do is do those one on one
Mhm.
and not in a group setting because it's almost like husband and wife, right? You want to get the arguments and kind of figure things out before you go and have a family meeting with everybody else. So that's a pretty important thing is having those because you're going to have disagreements.
Mhm.
You're going to see things very differently. I mean, this is the whole idea of integrator and visionary. One person's at the top of the tree saying, "Let's go this way," and the integrator is down on the ground saying, this is how we're going to get there. And the guy at the top of the tree might say, well, it looks like an easier way. And they might say, well, you can't, it might seem like you see the way from there, but from here, I see a different perspective. And this is actually how it needs to work.
Hmm.
So, like, trusting what they say is really important. And just having this, it takes a lot of humility, honestly. That's probably the most important quality that it takes to have a good relationship with someone who's really different from you is having humility and like hearing what they
Hmm.
say and not getting defensive and kind of like taking a deep breath and being like, okay. But there are times when you have to persevere, even when they disagree with you and say, look, but kind of choose those battles,
Yeah.
rarely, if you will. I think EOS pure is that if there's a disagreement, the integrator wins. I'm serious. I think that's EOS pure because the integrator is the one that's making it happen generally,
Hmm.
especially in a business like mine, which is fully remote, where I'm not only not at the office, but I'm 700 miles away and I come into the office, every few months. And so she's the one that's on the ground making it happen.
Yeah.
So if she and I disagree philosophically on a pretty big issue, that's going to be a problem at the way she manages the team and that kind of thing. So it's really important if you have a major disagreement that you figure it out. And I mean, look, there have been times when I upset her and done something. I mean, I sent her flowers and sent her a handwritten note and said, I'm so sorry I dropped the ball. And like, that's really important, right? Y'all's relationship has to be really strong
Hmm.
because the team can feel it when it's not.
Yeah.
And so I nurture that relationship and make sure that it's in good shape. So that's
Hmm.
a long answer to your question.
Wonderful. And then on that topic of you being so far away and working remote, so a lot of company owners, obviously, their goal is to get to a point where their business doesn't need them and it still runs well. You took it to a whole nother level of moving across the country
Mhm.
and still doing that. So, what kind of mindset shifts and challenges did you have to overcome to be able to get to that point where you're like, not only can this company run without me, I'm going to move thousands of miles away and I know it's going to be fine.
It's a good question. So there was a lot of steps that I took, but I think I think the way it starts is giving your team room to make decisions and make mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like letting them. I remember talking to that same mentor that I met in Talladega about 4 years ago, and he was like, "How's it going?" I was like, "Oh man, just so busy, man, running around doing quotes." He's like, "Wait, wait, wait, wait. You're still doing estimates? You're going on site and meeting with clients?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "I haven't done an estimate in 3 years." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Bro, you've got to train somebody to do that." I'm like, "But it's so detailed and drawing the pictures and to get it." He's like, "Bro, you are replaceable. Your estimating skills are replaceable. Train somebody else, hand it off to them, give them some parameters, let them do it." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And I did. And guess what? My designer, estimator, his job's more profitable than mine, right? And he's way better than I am now.
Mm-hmm.
And his pictures are prettier and the close rate's great. And so like I mean, detail all your processes, right? Train your people well and let him go out there and do that. And of course, in the first 6 months to a year when he was out there doing those designs and estimates, like, hey, some of them are coming in a little low on profitability.
Mm-hmm.
But like, guess what? He didn't make that same mistake twice. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And so when we review the projects and say, okay, cool, that one was only 40% profit. Oh, this one was 69. That's good. Okay, let's talk about what we did well here. Okay, cool. Let's pad this one a little bit more. What do we need to do here? And it was just going back and massaging it and getting it better and better. And I apply that same sort of mindset to every aspect of the business. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
estimating, cool, we've handed that one off. Okay, let's look at how we do customer service. Let's look at how we deal with a client who's upset. Let's look at this. We literally documented every single, well, not every single, but maybe 50 core processes. And we went over how we're going to do that. Sometimes we'd modify them.
Mm-hmm.
We made sure everybody knew what to do, that things were documented and followed by all.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kept on passing off things and passing off things. The last thing I gave up was marketing. So ran my own marketing for many, many years. And marketing is not something that I recommend giving up lightly because I mean it's the lifeblood of the business next to cash,
Mm-hmm.
which often drives the cash. I made my own Facebook videos, shot my own content for many, many years, and did well with it. Adding 5, 6, 700 clients a year, doing everything in house. And Facebook was our number one source of clients, still is. And about a year and a half ago, we brought in a marketing person in-house.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, I didn't want to give it up, but I knew that I was moving, leaning towards leaving town.
Mm-hmm.
And also like it was like the last thing that I was holding on to. And so and I was getting lazy and kind of forgetting to shoot content and forgetting to monitor. And I was like, you know what? You're right. I need to give this up too.
Mm-hmm.
And so I trained this person really extensively and I passed it off to her. Now I still keep an eye on things and we still talk often about, hey, let's tweak this, let's do that. But I handed off 80%, 90% of that job to her. And she's done really well with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, a lot of it is just training well, setting your expectation, and then letting them go out there and make some mistakes. I used to call the weather. I'd be the one who would text the crews, hey, it's raining, stay home, whatever. I did that until February 1st of 2021. That was when my wife and I, and at that point, our two young daughters went to Hawaii for a month. We
Mm-hmm.
went to Hawaii. I was working on a memoir, which is so funny to write a memoir at 32. That's a different story. And it's peak of whale season, and it was
Yep.
during COVID, so everything was cheap. We got really cheap flights. We went to Hawaii for a month on the Big Island, Kona, and lived in a little apartment down the street from this beautiful beach. And I was there for a month, and I barely worked at all on my landscape company. I worked on my book, and I went to the beach and explored Hawaii and saw a volcano that was flowing and all sorts of incredible and swam with a manatee. It's incredible. I mean, sorry, not manatee. Manta rays swam and touched my chest. It was amazing.
Yeah.
11 of them. And we had all these incredible experiences. And like, I just told the team, like, okay, I don't even think I told them that I was going to call the weather. It was just like, oh, they're going to take that over. And they did. And ever since then, it's been, I don't know, 2.5 years now. It's like, I don't call the weather. 3 years now. And so it was like one of those things of like, yeah, they can do that. Like,
Yeah.
I guess I should have told them but they knew that
Mm-hmm.
was coming. And so it's just these little things of just giving up. I've probably given up 200 different responsibilities over the
Mm-hmm.
past 3 to 5 years. And it's just like kind of painful. You're just like, let people make mistakes. I remember reading a book. Um, it might have been Good to Great. It's one of my favorite business books. But there's a story about Bill Gates and one of his like key employees. Either Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, probably Warren Buffett. He's got a little more character. And one of his key people made a mistake and cost the company $10 million. And he was like, he came into Warren Buffett's office and this and that. And he's like, I know, gonna turn in my papers, I know you don't want me. He's like, what? That, like, that was a $10 million training piece. Like,
Yeah.
you'll never do that again. And he was like, you're not gonna let me go? I was like, no, like, you'll literally never make that mistake again. Let's move forward and let's keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And, that mindset of like, just now that's a big example. Of course, Buffett's got a little buffer, but letting people make some mistakes, not making a huge deal out of it, because
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes it's a mistake of omission. If it's a character flaw, that's different. Those are red flags. But if it's, hey, I missed the number or this or that, let's coach them through it. A lot of it is just being a coach, right?
Yep.
Coming alongside your people and being a mentor and a coach and a friend
Mm-hmm.
and not a boss.
Yep. So I'm glad you brought that up. So for the last 10 minutes, I want to talk about, I saw you've moved more into coaching now. What made you make that decision?
It's a good question. I've done it naturally for a long time. So for the past 3 to 5 years, I'm in all these different Facebook groups. I think that's probably how you and I connected.
Mm-hmm.
And people keep, by the way that I respond to comments or things that I post, people ask me a lot of questions. How are you doing this? How are you doing that? I see you moved here. You do travel all the time. Facebook marketing. People, I mean, I probably had 150 people message me, people who don't know me from Adam, and say, can you help me with this? And I enjoy doing that. And so at some point, I thought to myself, huh, I think I can really help people. And I've got a track record. I've been in the business for a while. I enjoy it. I like teaching. I like
Mm-hmm.
coaching. And also, I kind of need something to do, right? Moved up here, South Carolina. I don't have an office. I mean, I'm in my basement right now. I have a co-working space I go to a few days a week. I ride my bike over there, put my bike in the elevator. It's hilarious, like a 20-story building. I feel like I'm living corporate America. It's so funny. But I need something to do. So I thought that a 4-hour work week would be satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
It's too small. It's not, it's actually not. I need a little bit more purpose in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So my kids are younger, 3 girls that are 6 and under. I need more going on to
Mm-hmm.
keep my brain stimulated and to challenge me. So
Mm,
it's great that my business is 700 miles away and that I'm not required to do a whole lot of it out of it. I dedicate Wednesdays to my business, um, the landscape company. But on Tuesdays and Thursdays, my kids are in school 3 days a week. And so I'm like, Tuesdays and Thursdays, those are going to be my days where I work on my next project. My next project, coaching. And so I started an executive coaching business about a year ago
mhm,
and working mainly with landscapers. I mean, I've worked with other types of businesses, a pickleball company, pest control guy, things like that.
mhm,
I've advised a lot of different types of businesses, tree services, but my regular clients are landscapers. And it's cool. My role is both a coach and a consultant, right? So
mhm,
coaches come along, they are accountability, they are sort of a third party, and they can help keep you accountable and stay on track to your long-term goals. Whereas a consultant has industry expertise. And so my role is both. It's a hybrid model where I can come alongside, but I can also say, hey, look, not only did I try this 5 years ago, I'm actually doing this right now, and I'm beta testing this specific ad or this specific method or this and that. And so it's real-time stuff. And I also often get invitations to go visit other companies, 10, 20, $30 million businesses, because I'm friends with these guys, because I network and go to these conferences and I can go learn from them, and then I can pass this wisdom down, not only things I've learned in my own business, but from others. And so it's a very satisfying thing to watch other business owners sort of get their life back. Some of their goals are, I want to build a $10 million business. Some of them are, I just want to be home with my wife more. Some of
mhm,
them are, I don't want to be in the red anymore, you know? And I love the process of coming alongside. And usually in that first interview, we can identify a lot of low hanging fruit and we can say, okay, cool.
mhm,
We can do this. Now there's some people who I might have a discovery call and it may be that, hey, look, I can't help you. You know, either you're so far along that you don't need my help, or you're in a position where you might be can't afford these services, or there's different things like that. But if I feel like we can both win, which is pretty common, then we'll move forward. And it's a win for everybody. It's a win for their families, it's a win for their community, it's a win for me, it's a win for them. And so it's a very satisfying next step for me as my business. I'm kind of semi-retired from my business now at
mhm,
35, which I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. And so I see myself for the next, I don't know, 20, 30 years of my life helping other people get their
mhm.
lives back. And so that's kind of a little bit about it.
Wonderful. So coaching then is going to basically become the long-term goal. That's what you're looking at for the 2030
Hmm.
year-end goal.
Yeah, yeah. So
Mhm,
building out I think my coaching schedule will probably be full by
mhm,
in the next few months, and then I hope to take care of those clients, help build them up, and I'm sure bring new ones in over time. I'm not trying to build a coaching empire. I
Yep.
want to just have really incredible clients, and I want to do great things together with them,
Mhm,
and um and I think that'll be very satisfying,
mhm.
and that'll be kind of a great next thing for me to be. So I am doing it now, and I hope to continue to do that for quite a while.
Wonderful, man. And then, so you've been answering a lot of questions. You've been in the industry a while. You've networked with a lot of people. What are the biggest challenges you see business owners in that, let's say, 0 to 1 million range facing? What are the most common ones you see?
Yeah, good question. I think two things are most common that I see. Number one, guys don't know their numbers. And number two is they don't know how to hire.
Hmm.
So, numbers, this is by far the most common. Guys don't understand, they don't know how to read a P&L. They don't know their
Hmm.
break-even rate per man hour. Um, that's a pretty important number to understand. And if you don't know that number, which is not that hard to figure out, then you're not going to know how to price your stuff. So, pricing and numbers, I so often see guys pricing jobs to win the job and not pricing for profit, right? There's this stupid industry, a norm that's like, yeah, a third profit, a third labor, and a third materials. It's like, where's overhead? Like,
Hmm.
don't be an idiot. No, that's not how it works. And also, a third gross profit, which is what that's talking about, your business is going to be in the tank really fast.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of guys don't understand their numbers. They don't understand the true cost of an employee, you know, their labor burden, and I mean, all the things that go with an employee and the cost of a bad employee. So guys not understanding their numbers, not understanding their margins, their gross margins, their net margins, their break even, how to price jobs. Well, a lot of guys aren't even tracking their profitability on a given basis for each service line that they're offering, things like that. So that's by far the most common and the most painful. Also the easiest to correct. I'll say that. Um, Number two is hiring. So I see all this complaining, oh man, millennials or Gen Z, they don't, dude, come on, man. You have to adapt with the times. if you want to attract good people, it's just like attracting good clients. You have to offer them something great that other people don't. We pay 70% healthcare. Like we have healthcare and we pay 70%, which is absurd,
Mhm.
right? I mean, I think I see the line item every month of my P&L in healthcare. I'm like, okay, that's a lot of money. But look at my people. Nobody ever leaves, ever. I mean, we might fire people, but quitting, going to another opportunity, it almost never happens. Our retention is insanely high, which most people don't say in a landscape company. I mean, I've got 17 employees. Most of them were here last year, even my field guys. I've got guys who've been in the field with me 6 or 7 years. And so we how to how to find good people. First of all, you have to have a great culture and play great place to work. And you should provide benefits if you can, and then pay better than the average.
Mhm.
And also give them some bonuses, give them some incentives. Hey, give them a carrot, right? I made less money than all of my employees, or at least most of my higher paid employees, for the first 5 years of my business.
Mhm.
You know, I was in the long game. Not everybody can afford to do that, but I'm in this for a long time. I want to keep this business and hold it and run it from afar for a long time, which means long-term investment. And then from a practical standpoint, I think Indeed is the best place to find employees. There's a lot of different ways to find people, but post a good ad on Indeed. And there's a trick that you can do where you have to pay for Indeed to post. But if you reject candidates that you don't like within 24 hours, you don't have to pay for them,
Mhm.
which is incredible. You save a ton of money. So that's just a little practical tip on Indeed, but it's a really great way to find people. Just make sure that your ad looks good. Like make sure it's attractive, not like,
Mhm.
you know, landscaping company, $15 an hour. No, 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 no. Talk about the culture, talk about the upside, talk about the benefits that you have. Be different, be a
Mhm.
unicorn, and you can attract really great people.
Cool, man. And do you have time for one more question?
Yeah.
So I hear a lot of talk about the 0 to 1 million range, but I feel like you don't hear a lot about the $1 million to $3 million range. So, what would be your one? What are the biggest challenges people are facing in that $1 million to $3 million range? Where, hey, I've created a system around hiring. I know my numbers pretty well, but for someone who's going into that $1 million to $3 million range, what are the biggest challenges, and what's your advice for them?
It's a good question. So, usually one of the biggest challenges at that point is having your marketing dialed in, right? So, it's pretty easy to get to $1 million with friends, family, neighborhood, that kind of thing. Like that can happen pretty quickly. Most
Mhm.
people can do that in 5 or 6 years if you got a decent business.
Mhm.
Now it often, of course, depends on what kind of if you're design build, super easy because you have so much materials. If you're fert and weed control, it could take a while, but margins are better. So, but once you hit a million plus, number one, you're going to start having some overhead. And so you got to support that overhead well. And number two, the marketing is really an important piece, especially in the recurring revenue model, right? Mowing, fert and weed control, things like that, pest control. That's where you really need to have because industry standard is going to be a 15 to 25% churn rate. That's a lot of people leaving. I was with a company in Austin a few weeks ago, huge company. Their churn rate is 27%. That's like 2,000 people that are leaving every year.
Mhm.
And they're one of the best, right? That's just it is what it is. So you better have your marketing game dialed in. And I see a lot of guys, they'll hire these marketing firms and the guys don't know marketing themselves. And so they'll just let this marketing company kind of run wild and they won't have numbers that they're holding them to. I mean, your marketing company should be just like an employee where like you have numbers you're holding them to. They're accountable, they have KPIs. And I see them get burned. A lot of them just throw a whole lot of money at SEO and at Google, and they don't play the Facebook game. And they do a lot of really dumb mailers. Like you can do mailers well, but they do like dumb mailers, and
Mhm.
they just waste money on marketing things that don't work. And they do a lot of Facebook posting, which nobody sees. Facebook posts or boosting. Like, please stop wasting money on that. Instead of targeted ads to the right people.
Mhm.
And so what happens is they get all frustrated. They pay all these marketing companies all this money, and then what happens is their overhead's pretty high, and then they're not able to maintain the attrition, and then they get stuck at like 1.2, 1.3, and they just can't get past it. If you want to get past it, you better know marketing yourself so you can either do it in house or have somebody really good and you kind of know can hold them accountable. And then you can go to the next level. And you got to spend money on marketing. I mean, 4, 5, 6% revenue at least, good marketing, or else you're just going to fizzle out. There's only so much that goodwill and a good reputation can get you. Like you got to be paying for eyeballs. So those are the two things: is managing your overhead well, and then having your marketing dialed in. That's the way to get to 3 million.
Oh, awesome. Well, hey, Rob, this has been a super great interview, man. Like, you just gave great knowledge. I really appreciate you giving me your time today.
Oh, anytime, man. Happy to be on the show.